Hello, and welcome to Metachemistry. This is episode 108, and we have one of our Winner's Circle episodes where we bring on the champion of an event and talk about what went on, how the games went, particular observations, or perhaps preparation for said event, and basically, how does that help them get where they are? And for today, we're going to be talking about Sin City Smackdown. I could be wrong. I don't have the list of events in front of me, but I believe this is the first uh, United States ITS event for N5. Does that sound right to you?
It was definitely the first satellite. I don't know about the first event. There may have been,
Or
Yeah.
satellite event. Yeah,
weekend
that's what I was thinking.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah. And Rob Paul, aka CobraPrime, took the event yet again and is on here to talk with us about how that went. And it sounds like it had a pretty fun format, so we'll go into that as well and just kind of see how Rob just keeps getting the job done.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Very well.
Yeah, things are good, man. Really appreciate you joining us.
Of course.
I know sometimes coordinating even a couple time zones can be a little tricky sometimes, so I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, no worries.
So, before we start diving into things, I want to give a quick shout out to Mo Games, sponsor of our show here. Mythic's Online Emporium is an online supplier of Infinity, which you can find at mo-games.com. And as part of that sponsorship, if you are a paid patron of any level, because you can be a free patron of ours now, if you are a paid patron of any level, you get a 10% discount code to Mo Games. And whether you're a patron or not, if you're part of our Discord, we raffle off a $40 coupon code every month that's available to any users who are in North America for $40 off a Mo Games order. Because what's better than games? Mo Games. So, that said, tonight we have Ian, Rob, and myself. And so, Rob, I imagine that many of the listeners of our show already know you
Seems likely.
as one of the best players in the game today. Everybody sees CobraPrime on the leaderboards, so if you weren't aware, that's Rob here,
I do what I can. Yeah,
right? It works out, right?
it does.
That's awesome. Well, first of all, congratulations on winning the first U.S. satellite of the edition. I think it is. If somebody knows that there was a different satellite that was before this, let me know so I'm not
I know there are
spouting
quite a
misinformation.
few coming up in the next couple of months, but I think it was the first.
Right. Yeah. I know there. I want to say that there was something else on the East Coast that might
Well-
have been a satellite event that was around the same time. The Beantown Beatdown.
Oh, maybe.
that it?
I don't. Yeah,
I
it
don't know
was.
if that was a satellite or not.
I'm not sure when exactly it was, and I don't know if it was a satellite. I know that the Nova Open, which is over Labor Day weekend, was part of this season, and it was a satellite. So it definitely wasn't the first satellite of N5, but I think it was the first satellite of this season, which of course started way back in October or whenever the season
Right.
started. So this is sort of a weird season this year because N5 sort of called a halt to everything for a couple of months, and then things have been slow to
Yeah.
start up again. So it's just a
Jumping
little
right in the middle of it.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, definitely not the first of the season, but I want to say this is the first time an edition has been changed over mid-season. I feel like that's usually coordinated on a season changeover,
Yeah.
but I might be misremembering.
We haven't had that many changeovers that I've been a part of. I mean, I started in N3, so there was N4, which I think started on a season boundary, but it was probably more like an accident.
It did.
Yeah, so kind of interesting. I guess one of the things that I think people want to know about, just kind of in general, you've been playing the game for a while, but also you've gotten a fair number of games of N5 under your belt.
I've gotten 5 games of N5 under my belt.
Oh, okay. So this event, you've gotten this
Even
event
better.
under your belt.
Yeah, the first game of this event was my first game of N5, and I haven't got a chance to play it. So I'm hoping
Nice.
to get a couple of games in this coming weekend, but we'll see how that goes.
So on that note, I would imagine that we're kind of following things leading up to N5, and we're going through rules as they came out on launch day and things like that. How has N5 kind of measured up compared to what you kind of thought going in? It's been out for a
Mhm.
couple months, and then now you've gotten a chance to try it out.
I expected it to be very similar to N4 because that's what Corvus Belli told us. They said they were just polishing the diamond and not changing a whole lot. And I suppose that's true because the basic mechanics haven't changed.
True.
But there are so many
Mhm.
little things that are different that a lot of that intrinsic knowledge is even more wrong.
Mhm.
One of the problems with Infinity is remembering all the rules, and having survived several edition changes means that I'm still remembering things from N3 even when I was playing N4, and now I've got N3, N4, and N5 to remember and
Mhm.
figure out which is which. So
Feel that.
I think it just reinforces the fact that you can never really know for sure when you've got all of the rules right.
Yeah.
Which, in my opinion, is a good thing about Infinity because it keeps people humble.
Yeah.
So,
At least most people. Not naming names.
right. Well, I think it worked out pretty well. I haven't seen anything too terribly egregious. There are a couple of things that I think will probably be adjusted or dialed down in the facts or in rules changes coming up. But overall, I think it's a very good addition. I think things are probably a bit better than they were in N4,
Mhm.
and definitely better than N3.
Sure. Yep, I would agree there. Yeah, if you had to pick like one or two positive and negative changes over the edition, does anything stand out to you? I know you've only played a handful of games so far, but
Well, of those handful of games, I didn't face a single guided missile launcher, so that's definitely a positive, benefit.
yep, I know that was a hot button.
I like the changes that they made for Spotlight.
Mhm.
I like the fact that it gets a saving throw now. They changed on ammunition to go back to only one save, although it now works on total immunity people, which is
Mhm.
a really big
Mhm.
change, right? It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it really is.
It helps a lot, yeah.
On the other end, I think super jump is broken. I think it's probably going to be changed. The ability for any super jumping model to be able to move 6/6 or 8/8 if they have super jump 8 is pretty egregious.
Yeah.
So I think that that's probably going to be dialed down. And turrets, everybody's talking about turrets. So I'd be happy to discuss that a little bit, but I have a feeling that it's probably going to be adjusted. I think it's good. I don't think it's as good as a lot of people are complaining about,
Mhm.
but the ability for it to be a peripheral and be placed anywhere within 8 inches of the model, I think is probably a bit much. And I have a feeling that that'll be changed.
Yeah, if it were just a base or a silhouette contact deployable, that would make a huge difference on how effective it is.
Right. Just like a mine. I mean, even if you could throw it, but you have to make a roll, I
Yeah.
think that that would balance it
That
out a
feels
bit.
like a nice
Mhm.
compromise. But yeah, I think just offhand, I haven't played with or against many turrets. It's happened once or twice, but generally speaking, I don't feel like they're ludicrously powerful. I feel like it's one of those gear check things, right? Either you can deal with them fairly handily, or it causes you a ton of
Mhm.
problems.
Absolutely. And I think that because they changed the fire team rules so that fire
Mhm.
teams don't have burst 2 in ARO anymore, the turrets are sort of meant to take up that defensive gap to fill the space where a fire team used to hold down
Mhm.
areas or zones, right? Being
Mhm.
able to place a deployable turret to protect an area is the same sort of thing you used to do with a fire team, maybe
Sure.
a couple of fusiliers and a fire team that were burst 2, now you have a turret that doesn't risk your orders, but it's burst 3 with worse ballistic skill. I think that that's the tactical niche that
Mm.
they were trying to fill with it.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm not sure if it's successful or not. The ability for it to be, spammed and have a whole bunch of them put out alongside the baggage changes, which I think are very good, is counterbalanced by the fact that they're not that difficult to deal with. I mean, smoke deals with them pretty well.
Yeah,
One volley from a good gunfighter will take care of them. There's a lot of different options for dealing with them, but
for sure.
I don't know. I still haven't had enough games to really judge whether it's balanced
I've
as it
yet to
is or
even
if it needs
face
to
a
change.
deployable turret in any of the games I've played.
I use them pretty effectively in
Mhm.
the tournament. I didn't drop a ton of them, but I did drop one or two in each game, and they did
Yeah.
help quite a bit, right? I don't think that they were overpowered, but they did kill Yojimbo, who
Nice.
prevented him from coming up and murdering my Maggie. So
Yeah.
I can't complain. It worked pretty well.
They seem more like a a strategy in order to kill enemy models. They seem like a road block or a speed bump to make them waste orders.
Absolutely. Just like most offensive measures in Infinity are, they're a speed bump, a thing to slow your opponent down to run them out of orders. And
Mhm.
I think that it works very well that way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do that in the first turn.
Unless you're Kestrel.
It doesn't really impact the overpowered nature of going first. But I'm hoping that there are other ways that that's been balanced in N5.
Yeah, I'm curious to see when the first big FAQ of N5 launches, what that's going to look like. Because yeah, the super jump one is the one that gets me the most. Just because
Mhm.
mobility is saving orders, and more orders means you can do more things.
Absolutely. Yes. 6/6 move on anything with super jump right off the bat is pretty egregious.
Yeah, and it's a fair amount. It's for an S2 model at least, it's about the same in terms of verticality because the silhouette is almost 2 inches tall, I think, or right about. So if you're trying to leap up terrain, it's about the same. But yeah, when you can just kind of shunt yourself forward, that can be pretty fast. But the silhouette 2 jump or super jump 8-inch models are the ones that are kind of on my radar. I was like, I don't think this is a good thing to have.
Oh yeah, Seraph going 8/8 is just ridiculous.
At least the Seraph, most things are going to see it if it's jumping around, theoretically.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm worried about
Like
things
the
like,
Rodox or
yeah, Rodox or Quadage or things like that where you can just
Mhm.
shoot up the battlefield and get in range super fast, and not necessarily be seen. And that's why aerial vehicles, I don't think, have been too crazy so far. I know that there was some caution around those because they looked like they'd be pretty powerful, but I don't think that they are wildly so. I think that they're pretty good,
Yeah,
and they vary.
yeah, I think
Like
you're
some are
right.
better than
I
others for
faced a
sure.
couple of them, and you're right that them being visible means that they're taking AROs most of the time when they move up the board.
Hmm.
So they didn't seem terribly oppressive because you could stop them the same way would stop any other big thing moving up the board, and they're not as
Right,
tough as a tag, but they're the same size. So
for
Except
sure.
for that one that
Mhm.
Pano has.
Yeah, I haven't played the Red Eye yet because that one is
I haven't
armor
actually
6.
reviewed all of the different armies, so
Yeah,
I'm not even sure what's out there.
yeah, that one is it's a Spitfire chain rifle Blitzen with Mim 6 and armor 6 and BS 13. So it's
Oof.
pretty
Yeah.
solid, and it's like I want to
Yeah,
say in the mid 40s
Yeah.
offhand.
2 structure.
yeah, it sounds pretty good.
Right. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so that said, why don't we talk a little bit about the Sin City Showdown or Sin City Smackdown? I'm sorry, getting it confused
Mhm.
with the other S tournament.
Yeah.
So, Rob, you want to go over kind of the structure of the event because I know that wasn't just quite just play out of the packet sort of event.
Yeah, it was definitely a unique event, and right off the bat, I really like the fact that people are doing interesting things with event formats. I think it's really cool, right?
Totally.
Like straight up ITS events are fun, right? And the fact that the season changes from season to season still mixes things up, right? And gives
Hmm.
you a variety of different events. But I like the fact that people are just throwing out some crazy stuff just to see what happens, right? And how it works. And this was definitely a risk. I know that George got plenty of complaints from some people about the restrictions that I'll talk about in a minute. But overall, I think the event was made better for it. I think that it made people really think their list building, and it provided a unique challenge that I thought made the event more fun. I also like the ResOps format, right? I think it's
Hmm.
a lot of fun.
For sure.
I am a bit biased because I think the ResOps format really lends itself to my particular playstyle. I seem to have a pretty good record with ResOp events. I played in a full ResOp 5-round tournament last year and I won that one as well. So I think that I like ResOps and I do well with ResOps. So that might be, a little bit of internal bias on my part, but I
Sure.
think it's a lot of fun and I hope that more events decide to do that.
Yeah, like if you can get past the logistical portion of ResOps, I think it's a great format. And I think it's really good for kind of your regular pickup games when
Hmm.
everybody's like, oh, what mission do you want to play? I don't know. What do you feel like playing?
I don't know. Let's just do ResOps.
Right?
The organizers chose all of the battlefield conditions. They didn't publish them ahead of time. They only put them up on the screen at the beginning of the round.
I think that's a good call.
So they were a surprise for everybody, but they were also the same for
Right.
everybody. So it was basically fair across the board, which I thought was a really good way to do it. The real curveball was in list building restrictions. When everybody signed up, they were asked to pick two numbers at random between 1 and 6. And then when I don't know exactly when, because I signed up a little bit late, and I found out about this after it had apparently already taken place. But they were all told which number, what restriction their number aligned to, and I've got the list here. There was one list, but all of your profiles are AVA 1, right? Which means that you can only have one Riot Girl, right? You can only have one Fusilier, right? Regardless of what loadout you have, you can only have one Fusilier, right? Each game, before determining the lists, your opponent chooses which of your two lists to play face down, so you don't get to pick which list you're using.
Okay.
One list must use Soldiers of Fortune extra, 85 points, 1 SWC of NA2 mercs, and the restriction was, further defined to mean that you could only play 215 points of actual models, right? So if you chose not to use any mercs, you just didn't get to use those points.
Yeah. So definitely going to bring those.
That plus the SWC tax was a bit rough.
Yeah.
In one list, the identity of your lieutenant and chain of command is open information.
I just basically play that way all the time.
Yeah, I suppose that's not a big negative to some people.
Yeah.
One of them was it initially started that you just one list, you couldn't have any specialists, but they adjusted that to be in one list. These specialists costed you 1 additional SWC per specialist.
Ooh.
Yeah, that is a lot.
That was honestly the roughest of the disadvantages. And then the last one was that one list must include one of each type of model available to your faction from the following: light infantry, medium infantry, heavy infantry, remote, warband, skirmisher, right?
Gotcha.
So not tags, you didn't have to take a tag, but everything else you had to play one of if you had one.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so those were the 6 random restrictions that you had to do in at least one of your lists. And of course, George said that if anybody wants to go crazy and work with all of the restrictions, you get a gold star. So I took that challenge and I made it so that all of my lists had all of those restrictions.
So you have the goldest of stars.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. I got my gold star. So
Nice. Did you actually get a little gold star prize?
I did, yeah.
Nice.
He gave out a little gold star for everybody. There were like 6 people who did it, maybe 7.
Nice.
And he gave us little gold stars to wear in our name tag so that we could point to it and say, "Look,
Awesome.
I'm badass." Haha.
Or I'm handicapped. Don't hurt me.
Right.
You lulled them into a false sense of security with all your restrictions and then took advantage of them.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, honestly, so not being able to have more than one of any one type of unit heavily restricted fire teams, especially with the new fire team rules, because I was playing Dashot and there aren't a lot of counts as in Dashot.
Yeah.
So I really couldn't get more than a level 1 fire team, so I just didn't have any fire teams. And then the SWC restriction was pretty heavy. Like I had, in order to bring an engineer and a hacker, that was 3 of my SWC because I also had to spend 1 for mercs. So that left me with basically 2 guns in the list.
Yeah.
If I didn't want any hackers, right? So
yeah, I know we kind of talked about this off air a little bit, but I get why it was changed from you can't bring specialists. Like it was ResOps, so specialists aren't critical, but
yeah, they're not critical, but there's
incidentally having them.
Right. Just the stuff that's like incidentally a specialist operative that you would want to play. It was super restrictive. So
yeah. But yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. A lot of interesting challenges. And I like that it was, semi-optional. Like you could kind of join into, however much buy-in you wanted, more or less.
It was, I mean, the restrictions that were randomized weren't optional, but since most of those restrictions were only on one of your 2 lists,
right? Yeah,
you could probably, stack all your restrictions on one list and then play the other list most of the time.
Because I assume you had to play a restricted list at least once.
Yeah, you had to play at least once, or one restricted list at least one time.
Yeah. So like, if you wanted to skirt around it, you kind of could, like at least a fair amount. I
didn't really see anybody doing that, but then of course I didn't hear people's conversations, so
sure.
I don't know. I just avoided all that and said, forget it. I'll just do both my lists. Crazy.
There you go. Nice, and obviously it worked out anyway, so very cool.
Yeah, that's true. It was a fun challenge. So
Yeah. And so I know one thing that you wanted to talk about, especially because this event was all ResOps, so 5 rounds of ResOps, and you wanted to talk about the format in general and kind of can you go into a little bit about how you approach ResOps? Like, how does that change your list building, if at all? Or what are some of your thoughts as you're kind of going into a game of ResOps?
yeah, so like I said, I particularly like ResOps because it kind of really fits with my playstyle. It's sort of in the middle of the road between kill your opponent and accomplish mission objectives.
Hmm.
It removes some of the worst parts of getting mission objectives because you don't have to, hit a button over and over again or, get a box out and then keep it. A lot of the stuff in the current ITS that is, you know, reliant on luck has sort of been removed because like placing a beacon doesn't really require a roll.
Right.
Grabbing a civilian requires a roll, but it's not a difficult roll. I think everybody gets +3 to grab a civilian now.
I think so. Yeah.
So a lot of I failed 5 rolls in a row and lost the game because I couldn't do the mission stuff is eliminated.
The worst.
But there are still mission objectives that can be accomplished without having to fight your opponent.
Hmm.
So, going just all out and trying to kill everything, while that is still an effective strategy because if your opponent doesn't have any models left, they can't do any of the missions. You can also just sort of play defensively, avoid conflicts that aren't to your advantage, and just focus on doing your missions, and you can still win the game.
Yeah.
I think it's a very good balance of the way Infinity used to be, where it was much more objective based and mission based than just kill your opponent based.
Right. Yeah, I definitely prefer missions that lean that way because anything you can do to disincentivize just tabling your opponent is generally better for the game in my mind.
Yeah, and I think that Infinity has kind of moved away from that in recent years. It's become very much who can go first and destroy your opponent first has the advantage. And while that is still possible in ResOps because the strategy of just kill everything your opponent has still works for ResOps missions in most part, you can also not do that and still succeed, right? Because I don't think I had more than half of my army alive at the end for more than maybe one of my games.
Hmm.
And I still, managed to get most of the mission objectives completed in most of the games. So, yeah.
Yeah. And ResOps ends in retreat.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's really easy to not
Yeah.
score a bunch of stuff on accident if you push too hard.
Also, most of the ResOps missions have the advantage from going second
Right.
because being able to end the game and move your models into position or drop stuff at the last minute or move to connect with your consoles or whatever it is you have to do can all be done in the last round when your opponent can't shoot you off of them.
Exactly.
So going second has a big enough advantage to counteract the advantage of going first.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I generally like ResOps a fair bit. I'm really glad they added it to the game. I still kind of chuckle sometimes about the big reinforcements update and that ResOps was the best part of the reinforcements update.
Yeah, that is funny. So for list building, I tend to focus on one list.
Mhm.
In normal ITS missions, I'll usually split the missions and I'll choose lists that are better for each mission. But in ResOps, since you have no idea what you're going to get, I tend to make lists for table density, right? So I'll have a long range list and a short range list based on what kind of a table I run into.
For sure.
Now, of course, in this event, I didn't really get the luxury of doing that since I had to, I basically had very few options in what I could actually build with. So I couldn't really create a focus. But my 2 lists were pretty different. One list had Maggie in it. The other list had a bunch of midfield skirmishers.
Okay.
Both were focused on area control and zone control and close range combat so that I could basically decide where I wanted to take fights and execute those fights successfully. I tried to focus on that, and I think that that's very successful for ResOps because if you can control the areas where all of the objectives are, then your opponent can't get to them and can't do those missions.
Right.
And if you can kill your opponent, again, that pretty much prevents them from doing any of the missions. So
Yeah, and that's like, half of the cards probably are either sit in a spot or sit on something, or keeping your opponent from sitting on something.
and the other half are either kill your opponent's thing or, more importantly, prevent your opponent from killing your thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you feel about the balance between the set of tactical objectives?
Some of them are significantly harder than others.
I agree.
Right. So I would prefer the game allow you to spend the command token to redraw earlier so that you can, settle on your objectives before you choose your list.
Yeah.
I think a little bit more flexibility in what you get. And honestly, I think that they should perhaps be adjusted a little bit. Maybe we'll get another edition of them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they'll be balanced out just like they did with, the mission cards.
The classifieds, yeah.
Yeah, the classifieds. So I think that that's something that could be balanced a bit better. Some of them are much more difficult to do, and I don't see them very often.
Yeah.
Whereas some of them are, very simple. Okay,
Don't die.
this thing is in my deployment area. I have to touch it. Okay, that was easy, right?
Right.
Now go do it to the one in the enemy's deployment area.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, and if you're stuck with a couple of those, then the game can be based on just the luck of the draw, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do wish it was draw then discard rather than discard and then you're locked into whatever you get.
Yeah.
That would be nice. I would also like to see a little bit more counterplay. Like maybe you have to reveal one of the cards, and then maybe certain skills could
Maybe
interact further with that.
Yeah, counterintelligence makes your opponent reveal one of their
Exactly.
cards.
I think that would be, those sorts of things would be kind of neat to just have a little bit more interplay with the tactical objectives. Because other than what is it, priority targets, where your opponent picks 3 things that you have to kill. I think that's the only one that's public, and it's really weird to me that
It is.
that's the only one like that. I'm just like, why? Like, I understand that you can't really secretly do that very well, but
it's also very difficult, right? Like, if you compare, as an example, comparing that one to the kill the lieutenant, right? So killing the lieutenant is one of the harder ones,
sure,
especially since once you kill the lieutenant, you've only got 2 points. You have to kill a second lieutenant to get the 3rd point. And after you've killed the first lieutenant, figuring out who the second lieutenant is even harder than figuring out who the first lieutenant is.
Yeah.
And since the lieutenant's not public information, it's one of the more difficult tasks. But the one where you have to pick 3 models, you could just pick the lieutenant, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it just as hard as killing the lieutenant. Plus, they have to kill 2 other models that you also get to pick.
Right.
So it's like innately more difficult than just killing the lieutenant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always run into I'm just going to pick this model that's prone on top of the most inaccessible building.
Right.
And then I'm going to do that 2 more times, and I'm like, okay,
right. Good luck.
Guess I'm not getting those objectives.
Yeah, and with both of those, both priority targets and decapitation, I think the card is also called, for the lieutenant one. For both of those, a lot of times by the time you get those points, you've had to nearly table your opponent to get there because they're going to be protecting them. Like, the lieutenant's generally going to be protected in a lot of lists anyway,
right,
in some fashion or other. And then the priority targets are obviously, like Ian was saying, going to be things that are either very, very tough or things that you're probably not going to take the time to go back and get unless you punch through everything else first.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
It pairs well with the kill all of your opponent's models secret objective. But outside of that, it's a little rough. But if you're already planning on that, sure, pair it up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that being said, how did your individual games go? Were there any particular things that stood out to you that were really interesting, or maybe things that you didn't really expect with some of the rules changes, or just other things that people brought that were really surprising to you and ended up, maybe they paid off or maybe they didn't?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of new stuff. Like, I didn't get to play against Joel, but I know that he brought a list that had 3 tags in it, including 2 seraphs. And I heard horror stories from his opponent about them descending from the skies on the other side of his, in their deployment zone, wreaking havoc. So I'm kind of glad that I didn't have to play against that. Although I did have, a pretty decent hacking network to try and take him over, and I would have enjoyed trying to fight, Seraph on Seraph action with his Seraph.
Right.
It just sounds terrifying. And
Yeah.
played against Josh, who had an Agamemnon, and let me tell you, that thing is the most terrifying tag I have ever gone up against.
Yeah, it's brutal.
If he hadn't got unlucky and it, took some wounds to some mines, it probably would have completely thrashed me, because anything that thing looks at dies, right? With that PS4 continuous damage HMG,
that's AP.
if it can see it, it will die. Yeah, it's just ridiculously good.
Yeah, I think that is such. I mean, listeners of the show are not going to be surprised by this, but I hate that.
Right.
I hate do everything weapons like that, where it just feels like it goes against the design of the game, where you're supposed to have the right tool or adjacent to the right tool to deal with something. And this is just like, cool. Well, anything that this points at goes away. You get one hit.
Yeah, definitely. I hate continuous damage to begin with. Like, I think it is my bane, which probably stems from when I was very new to Infinity. I had my Gorgos, which was fully tricked out with a symbio mate and a symbio bomb. Who was it? It was Phoenix. I went up against Phoenix.
Yeah.
And got crit. And back in the day, when you got crit, it did an automatic wound, and an automatic wound fire burned away your symbio mate, your symbio bomb, and all your symbio armor.
Yep.
And then you have to roll the continuous damage. So I failed one armor roll and lost my tag, and that touched me in a bad place.
Yep. Fair.
I hate continuous damage. And man, that Agamemnon is brutal.
Because the Azrael wasn't big enough.
Yeah,
it did make me want to play it though. Well, the Azrael's not necessarily. Well, it didn't used to be good, right? It was a mediocre gunfighter that just happened to also have continuous damage. The Agamemnon was a freaking BS-14 powerhouse, right? With all the armor and all the weapons and all the plus it's good in close combat, so you can't even fight it effectively in close combat. Although I suppose I shouldn't say that, because I did kill it with a digger, but it was a coin flip, right? And I had to win the coin flip. So
yeah, the Agamemnon is like deterrent level CC in my mind. Like, anything that's really good will punk it, but
but it's good enough to win that coin flip occasionally.
Yeah, that's true.
In fact, CC, I think the changes to CC were one of the other things that I was surprised about, because I had thought that CC was buffed with the rules changes to CC, but since you don't add the stats above 20 anymore, so like you don't add 5 to your roll if you have a 25 martial arts, right?
Yeah.
If you roll an 18, it's an 18, right?
And not a crit, sure.
I'm not sure if that's an advantage or not, right? Because if you roll a 15, what could have been a 20 is now a 15, and if your opponent rolls an 18, it doesn't matter that your CC is 25 and theirs is 20.
Sure.
They succeed and they win the fight, right? So
yeah,
I haven't done the math yet, but I think that it might be a side grade or a downgrade to CC in general.
It's a side grade because mathematically you have the same amount of chances to hit that like crit.
Crit, yes, but not to necessarily win. Yeah.
Yeah, but the difference is that instead of rolling high and that wins, it's done on the other end. So like, instead of you rolling a 2 and then like, your opponent beating you out because they rolled like a 6, now that 2 is just a crit and you wreck them.
Yeah, but it used to be that if you rolled a 2 and your opponent rolled a 6, if I rolled a 2 and I added 6 to it because I had a 26 martial art or 26 CC, I would have beat that 6 anyways, right?
Yeah, it's just the thing of like the low rolls not getting just slightly beat out. Now it's like, it's a crit.
Yeah, now you just get slightly beat out if you roll a 15 and they roll an 18.
That's true.
So I'm not sure if that's changed a whole lot in the dynamics of the statistical modeling of the fight anymore. I'm not sure.
The reason I feel like it probably does slightly favor CC specialists is because most of the time, if you're rolling, 15, 16 plus, you're probably beating the enemy roll. And if you're rolling low to where you would get beat out, then you're just critting instead. It does make the middle ground more contested, like the 8 to 14 range or what have you. Most things will still be able to roll in that range. But if you're picking on things that aren't specifically good in CC, as an example, okay, well, they can't hit you on higher than say a 16 anyway,
Right. I think,
after you're applying penalties and whatnot.
I think it makes the mediocre but still good CC specialists like the Gakis that are 20, right? Or the Tigers that are 21 with no special skills.
Yeah.
I think it makes them better because it gives them the opportunity to roll those high numbers and not get just overpowered by the high numbers of the martial arts specialist.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it kind of gets balanced with the martial arts 3 plus
Yeah.
getting to roll multiple dice just without having support.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Happy to see that again.
That and the extra die from the special die, I found some really interesting interactions with things like shooting into close combat, right?
Yes. It is awesome.
Like, it's much better to shoot into close combat with a special die than it is with, burst 2, because you're more likely to, hit correctly and sit and not hit your own guy, right? Or shooting a Panzerfaust, right? With a special die, you only use up 1 ammunition, whereas you get 2 rolls and things better. So in some circumstances, that special die is actually much better than an extra burst would be, which I found really surprising.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And I feel like most of the time, if you're firing with something with a high burst, you weren't getting all of those dice through to begin with. Yeah. So it's not like it's a real loss.
Yeah, and winning the face-to-face roll is much better than dealing the damage at the other end anyways, because even if you're the one spending the orders, winning the face-to-face roll means you've achieved whatever it is you were trying to do. Even if what you were trying to do was kill that guy, you still got to move plus try and kill that guy. So unless all you're doing is just shooting to try and kill that guy, it's basically the same, if not better, depending on what you're trying to do.
For sure.
So I'm pretty happy with the special die roll. I rated it.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to keep similar levels of accuracy, but lowering the lethality a little bit.
Yeah.
Only slightly, I think, but by some. But yeah, what about the games themselves that you played? Any cool moments that you thought were really interesting, like during those games? Besides Agamemnon Night Terrors?
That was pretty brutal. I mean, I can make sure that everybody learns from my mistake and make sure you read your cards well. I had a mistake in Josh's game, and he was a total gentleman about it, where I misread the card. So I can definitely say, make sure that you are doing the missions that you think you're doing, because that's important in that game. I think that making your choices for your cards is really important. I've had to try and kill my opponent's lieutenant in these games, and it's really so in I think it was my second game, I had to both kill the lieutenant and kill 3, I think it was the second game, kill 3 models that he chose, and he picked Shoxes all the way in the back.
Yeah. And
you were absolutely right that I basically had to kill everything else in order to get across the table with McMurrow to kill them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sort of stream of consciousing here.
It's all good.
Like whether you add your martial arts to your role, because the Shoxes are 18s, right, in CC.
Sure.
And McMurrow's a 23 with martial arts 3, which puts him at a 26. So, when I rolled a 15, I'm like, oh, well, that's a 21. Like, that means I got 20, so it's a crit. So it would be 20 plus 1, right? And he's like, no, it's 20 plus 6 is the crit. You don't add anymore. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
He didn't end up rolling an 18, right? It didn't end up mattering, but that's what threw me for a loop. I was like, well, he could have, right? If that Choxa had rolled an 18, he would have beat McMurrow, even though McMurrow rolled a 15.
Well, not with your martial arts, though, right?
Right. I guess, yeah, he would have been down to 15. So, like I said, it didn't end up mattering, but it kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
It got me off on that tangent of thinking about how things interacted.
Yeah.
Also, McMurrow did turn into a total badass. He honor-dueled Musashi in 2 different games and came out victorious. And let's tell you,
nice.
Miyamoto Musashi, with his immunity arm, is a total badass. But McMurrow is just as good, man. All you got to do is get lucky.
Yeah. So speaking of McMurrow, by the way, it sounds like he performed pretty well. I know that there are a fair number of Ariadne players who are kind of down in the dumps a little bit with the state of things. I'm not one such player, so I don't really know what to compare to for Ariadne. Yeah, how did that feel to you?
Well, we know that you're just bigoted against the ATEX, so.
I'm not bigoted. I'm just wildly indifferent.
Well, now that makes me want to play Ariadna. I don't know. McMurrow was my superhero, man. He was
Nice.
I mean, I'm a big fan of McMurrow. In N4, he was my favorite model to play. So I may be a little biased, but he did great. I mean, the fact that he's 6'6" instead of 6'4"
Right.
is good. It's not like much better than he was before because he was already, moving 6 and throwing smoke on 19s.
Yeah.
Now he throws smokes on 16s, which isn't quite as good. It's a little bit of a nerf, but 16 is still pretty solid, right? And now I don't have to choose between dodging and throwing smoke. They're both the same number. I can do whichever is, better for my battlefield advantage. If I want smoke there, I throw smoke. If I am being shot by MSV, I dodge. Whichever happens to be better in the time, I can do it and not have to worry that the smoke is a better bet.
For sure.
But he's still really good in CC. He didn't really get any buffs, but he also didn't get any nerfs, right?
Other than just
and
generic
he killed
stuff.
pretty much everything I attacked with him, right? Like he fought Musashi twice and won. Admittedly, those are coin flips, right? And I just got lucky. But I'm rolling 2 dice against his 3 dice. And I think other than that, it's basically the same, right? Like I had an extra wound, so actually I didn't end up having an extra wound because I had 2 and he had 1 plus no wounding cap.
Oh,
But we
fair.
both had immunity arm. So I had a stronger PS on my attack, I suppose.
Yeah.
So there's that advantage. And McMurrow has armor 4, whereas Musashi is armor 1. So that plus Musashi has an extra 1 or 2 on the die roll. So I think I'm not sure where the advantage actually lies, but I got lucky and crit on both of those fights, both of the rolls to kill him. So
Yeah.
McMurrow's still a badass, basically. He killed Tankos, he killed Damaru, he wiped the floor with some little fire team guys, cheerleaders in the back arc. He can still double chain rifle in 2 different directions while just taking hits. I don't see any nerf to dogs at all. I haven't tried bears yet, but I was never a big fan of bears. The last time I played Cosmoflot, I did it without bears, and I did just fine. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I never really thought they were all that amazing. Did they get super jump?
They were climbing plus.
They have climbing plus?
Yeah, they're climbing plus. They lost a point of armor. Climbing plus now has to follow all the rules of climb, so it's not as fast. And they took a little bit of a nerf to the PS of some of their CC weapons and things like that, along with the smoke stuff and everything else that went along with that.
Yeah, well, the fact that they are susceptible to
flash
pulses now, that's huge, right?
Yeah, stun and adhesive.
And adhesive, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, they're less susceptible to adhesive because they all have really strong physiques, so they're more likely to succeed at those saves. But still, the fact that it affects them at all is rough.
Yes.
They can. I mean, they could be jammered before, but those are significant deterrents, right? Like a flash pulse bot is now something that McMurrow has to worry about. So I suppose that is definitely a big change. And I've always said that McMurrow's greatest weakness is a TR bot, so the prevalence of turrets is probably a big disadvantage to running them as well.
For sure.
But he still has smoke, so I don't know. I think I play McMurrow differently than a lot of people do. I don't just run him across like a missile.
Yeah.
I'll move him up to the midfield and wait for an opportunity. Like he'll lie in wait for the best chance to strike. So I don't know. Maybe the fact that I play him a bit differently than most people means that I didn't really have to worry about those disadvantages, and I still got him in close to do what he does best.
Nice. Yeah, that is pretty wild, beating out Musashi multiple times in a row.
It was an honor duel too. It was Mike Klein. That was it. Mike Klein. I was
gotcha.
I was fighting Mike Klein's Oban, and he said, "Hey, I think we should honor duel," and it was totally not the most tactically correct move for me to make. Right, like I should have totally thrown smoke and moved my Rushi over to shoot him in the back.
Yeah,
through the smoke, but I was like, fine, let's do it. But I moved McMurrow in, and we honor dueled, and I moved in and I won the first conflict, and then I just left him so that he had to spend the order for the second fight.
Yeah,
and I won that one too. So
yeah, that's crazy.
But he was honorable in that fight. He wasn't honorable later. He tried to double team me, that dirty dog. But Musashi was honorable, so I got to give him total credit for that. It was pretty badass.
Yeah, Klein's a lot of fun in games. He's a joy to play.
Yeah, Mike's a good dude.
He is, yeah.
But yeah, Musashi throws 3 dice in CC by himself.
Yeah, he really does. Him and
Shinobu.
And he wasn't by himself. Yeah, him and Shinobu.
Yeah.
Both, throwing 3 dice, and that's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
But yeah, well, hopefully that is heartening for our Ariadne listeners that the dogs are still around. They can still hang.
Well, now I gotta try and work on some Ariadne lists and see
Yep.
what
Well, and honestly, the fact that all the dog and bear types got BTS 3 kind of makes up for like getting affected by stun and stuff, because now they have a little protection against stuff that they just went down to before.
I suppose so. I don't know if it's an equal trade. Like, I don't think
No.
I'd trade being susceptible to stun for BTS 3, but at least they got something.
Yeah, I would when I was playing Foreign Company, I would take CSUs with breaker rifles and just shred dogs and bears like there was no tomorrow, because the BTS 0. Like,
Yeah, that's
I don't care about your immunity.
And viral would mess them up, but I guess that was
Yeah.
supposed to, right? Viral's
Yeah.
supposed to mess them up.
Yes.
Yeah, and Breaker is still effective against them now because they are all immunity arm, not enhanced.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. But they still are BTS 2 against the breaker.
I mean, that's true. It's better than nothing.
It's better than 0.
But also, I find it really interesting that they're EM vulnerable now, so you can isolate these guys.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's like,
Yeah.
learning all these new corner cases. Like, I personally think that the no longer having a +3 on smoke grenades is a massive change to the game, right? It doesn't seem like much, but changing warbands to no longer smoke dodge on +3 is huge as far as meta, shifting goes.
I like it because the stuff that was good at it was generally like Fizz 14 or 16, and so it's still good at it. It's just not excessively good at it.
Yeah, I mean, the balancing factor was that you're shooting, 3 or 4 dice on them, and they get 1 die back, right? But the ability to toss smoke from around a corner in order to make your advance, right? You could basically guarantee your throws on a lot of those warband units, which made them a lot more dangerous than I think they were supposed to be. So I see why they did it, but I think it's a big change that people are going to have to adapt to, and we still haven't seen the full extent of how it's going to change the meta yet.
Now, that said, there is one model that works around the smoke restriction. The shotgun bear has a, what is it, a +4?
Yeah, BS attack +4.
Yeah, BS attack +4, but it's on the bear, not on its weapons. So it would apply to everything. So since throwing smoke is technically still a BS weapon, it throws smokes on 20s.
Why +4?
Until they FAQ
That's like the bang bomb. It irritates me.
Yeah.
Why is it +4? It should be +3. I don't get it.
Same. Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, another thing that we've talked about on the show semi-recently, but I feel like bang bombs just don't need to exist. They're not doing enough that is different compared to like a dodge -3.
Yeah, I don't understand what their purpose is, really.
It's the ninja smoke, and I've dodged, but mechanically, I agree.
Yeah, you could just get dodge +3. I guess the difference is that they're not as good against templates, but
yeah, it doesn't work against templates.
Yeah, but if you do -3, it ends up being the same. Like, you always dodge on your flat fizz. Your opponent's just getting a penalty, and so it's basically the same thing.
Oh yeah, because it doesn't subtract from templates anyways.
Yeah.
So good point. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand, but
it just irritates me that it's 4 instead of 3.
Agreed. That's definitely a big part of it.
That's the old school in me.
Yeah, no, I feel that too. But yeah, so that kind of, I guess just before that, kind of segues into something that I thought was kind of interesting. Did you notice a proliferation of EM weapons being fired in your games? Because I feel like there are a lot more in the game.
Yes, Miranda Ashcroft with the emitter +1 burst was brutal. My very first game, that emitter locked down my Magariba guard for the entire game. I moved Maggie up because I went first. I'm pretty sure I went first. I have a vague recollection at best of what actually happened in my games.
All good.
But I definitely got to the midfield to a point where I was, happy to go into suppression fire. But Miranda Ashcroft in her fire team with her emitter +1 burst just stood up with her min -6 in cover and annihilated me.
Yeah.
There was no chance of Maggie surviving that assault. And I spent the whole rest of the game rolling resets on 2s as he did whatever else he wanted to around her.
Yeah.
And when I eventually rolled that 2, he just stood Miranda up and shot him again.
Oh,
And the same thing happened. And then, later on in turn 3, I rolled another 2 and he stood Miranda up, shot him again. So Maggie was a brick the whole game.
I've had those games.
Yeah, the emitter is super good now.
Yeah.
Although I don't know how good it is on burst 2
yeah.
instead of burst 3 or 4 or whatever it was that Miranda had. I think it was 3 with a special die. So she was
Yeah, exactly.
rolling good. Plus, I mean, the platform is good anyways, min -6 and BS12 and all that.
And she picked up marksmanship.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and marksmanship. That's right.
Yeah, Miranda's gross now.
I couldn't take her because she cost me an SWC since she's just for some reason a specialist operative.
Yeah,
Oh.
I really wanted to.
Yeah.
Right. She's in Dashat, so I could have taken her, but that extra SWC was just too much.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that we're going to see a lot more EM. The
Mhm.
EM C weapons are basically the same as
Yeah.
far as I can tell, but that emitter is a big change.
Yeah, the emitter change is huge. I think that makes it much more usable. And because at burst 1 with combi rifle ranges, it was never used. Even
Very
if you
useful.
had it on a model, you'd barely ever fire it.
Right.
Yeah, now extra burst in some cases, extra burst, and the better range bands are huge. And the EM carbines are a nice plug as well. I think it's interesting to have more of these types of weapons to kind of combat all of these tags and heavy infantry that have been dropping and that are so much easier to fit in. I like that they're more effective to kind of combat those sorts of threats and kind of, do what they're supposed to do. I wrote an OSS list just to see, okay, it's the rogue AI hunting faction. How much EM can I fit into this list? And it turns out it was a
An awful
12
lot.
order. It ended up being a 12 order list, and 10 of them, the ones that weren't flash bots, had EM in some fashion.
Wow.
So that was like Max with his EM plus 2 burst carbine. Or no, that's sorry.
Hunting party list.
Right, yeah. Or no, not plus 2. That's the Maggie. Yeah, the EM carbine, and then Yadus have Emirats, and the character Yadu Shakti has a emitter turret that she can place, and different things like that.
Emitter turret? Oh man, I haven't seen that one yet.
She's the only one in the game that I've seen.
Wow.
So it's pretty fun. I need to try it out.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. You should find a tournament that's running hunting party.
Ooh,
Sounds perfect.
yeah.
No. Hunting party's so bad in N4 and later because you get out of states whenever someone does something.
Yeah, but now you throw out the EM turret and just keep putting them back in them.
Yeah, I'm gonna reset. Reset. Actually, I forget the order of operations. Does it? I think it would actually break out because I think that.
Well, in N4 it would. I don't know if they changed it. In N4 it wouldn't break out. You would resolve
apply the states after.
Yeah, the state after.
Yeah, that might still be the case. I haven't looked, but that sounds hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know. What's it called? The contenders got really good too, right? Contender being marksman rifle ranges is super good.
Mm-hmm.
And changed the Shikami from being a joke to being a must-have unit.
Yeah, the Shikami being so much more maneuverable on its own, and the CC changes, I think that it just... I tied one up with Maximus, the tag Maximus, and I spent 2 or 3 orders trying to fight it, because Max is Natural Born Warrior, CC -6, CC 24.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
And he just could not win a face-to-face roll against a Shikami who was on...
Super good, man.
20s.
The fact that they added Eclipse Smoke to JSA is brutal.
Yeah, Shikami are wildly good. I think that they're going to be a staple.
Yeah, I think CB got sick of all those awesome models not being used.
Yeah, they're one of my favorite models and profiles. And then it's like...
They are one of the best models. Before and back in N4, I would have never played them because they were frankly garbage, right? But now they're 6.6 with min -6 with a good gun and Eclipse grenades. They're super good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like a lot of the weapon changes, and I think that EM will probably be a little bit more prevalent. I don't know if it's going to be problematic. I think that there's definitely way more notable heavy infantry and tags and remotes than there are EM users.
I just gotta make it problematic and take nothing but guys with EM sticks to beat people with.
There you go.
Just makes your engineer who brought that turret even
Yeah.
more useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious if we're going to see a season in the next couple of years that does something cool for doctors.
Oh, maybe.
I think that would be interesting.
That was the other thing that blew my mind. The deactivator can be used out of line of fire.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah, like I took a shot against the emitter from Miranda. I didn't face to face it because I shot a mine and put it right in front of her, right? Because I
Sure.
figured this is the only way I'm going to get rid of her. I can't shoot her
Mhm.
'cause she's got min -6, right? She's
Right.
going to go prone at the end of the, so I can't see her. So I'm going to have to like spec fire something, make her dodge, and then hit her with the mine. But instead, he just moves his engineer, who's on the other side of cover that I can't see, into within 8 inches of it, and zone of control deactivates my mine. I'm like, what?
Like a
You
whip
can
plus
do
6,
that
I think.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it blew my mind. I was like, holy crap. So yeah, deactivators are actually good now.
But I like that because not only are deactivators good and useful, but they're almost kind of necessary with how much deployable stuff has been added with this edition between
Yeah,
turrets
for
and
sure.
deployable cover and just that kind of stuff. I'm like,
Disco balls and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
there's a lot going
Yeah.
on, and it makes that engineer profile or anybody that has a deactivator, but this makes them almost a must-have one in a list.
Yeah, I'm super sad that Fiddler didn't get one.
Yeah, that is rough. But she's looking really good too. I know that I've seen discussions about Fiddler not being as good anymore, and I don't understand that.
Anybody gets a deployable turret, she should get deployable turrets. I'm just saying, right?
How
Like,
many
she's all
things can she
about
put on the
turrets,
table?
right?
Yeah, I mean, I could see that, but like the +1 burst contender, like you talked about, the contender's already better. And
Mhm.
so burst 3 is at a point where, okay, this is something you can reasonably shoot at. Like this isn't, your primary gunfighter necessarily, but having a T2 marksman rifle is pretty cool. And then in some factions, she can join fire teams and gain a special die. She has super jump if you don't take the bots. These are all good things.
Yeah, I don't understand why she has CC attack +1 burst when she's not good in CC. But
Yeah.
I mean, she's still really
That's how-
good. Like as far as a model in general goes, she's great.
That's how I feel about the Marut. I don't know why it is CC +1 burst, but here we are. So the extra arms, I guess.
Yeah, if you're
Hey.
CCing with the Marut, there's something's gone terribly wrong.
Right.
Well, that's why it's +1 burst. And with Miranda, it's the +1 burst is her version of stop resisting.
Yeah. Does Miranda get +1 burst in CC? No, she doesn't. She has a monofilament close combat weapon
Okay.
and CC
Okay.
-6. No, she just cuts you in half.
Cool.
Yeah, she's not bad in CC, but
Yeah, 19 with -6. That's reasonable. You'll beat up on
Mhm.
things that don't have martial arts reliably enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, Fiddler with 18 and +1 burst, so she can double slap D charges on you at CC 12. Good stuff.
I think it just makes it more dangerous for you to fight her. I mean, but
Yeah.
it doesn't work in Arrow,
Arrow.
so I don't know.
Yep, exactly. Like she does have a para -3 weapon, so that's something. But yeah,
Zap.
yeah, it definitely is like borderline flavor text
Weird.
rule.
Yeah.
But yeah, so any predictions, perhaps, or other things that you've noticed that you feel like they're gonna be big for N5 moving forward from the things that you've seen?
I mean, I think Super Jump is going to be so big that it's going to be nerfed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not planning to build lists around it, right? I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that it's going to be curtailed pretty quick. And I think it's an easy misinterpretation, right? I think it was supposed to be you get to jump 6 or you get to jump, 6 plus your second half for a full move.
Sure.
I don't know. I think it was probably nobody thought about the implications of making both jumps 6. I think that warbands. Honestly, I think CC in general is better. I've been poking around with different list build combinations, and I have been less concerned about my SWC count.
Mm-hmm.
There's not as much that I care about that costs SWC
Sure.
anymore. Most of the lists that I've been building have been ending up around 2.5 to 3, maybe 4 SWC at most, which is definitely different than it was in N3 or in N4.
Yeah.
Just the prevalence of shock marksman rifles, of thunderbolts with +1 burst, with contenders, with +1 burst. All of the mid-range guns are better.
Yeah.
And they are not the SWC costing guns are also on platforms that cost more points. And the fact that you have to pay both for one extra burst just isn't worth it anymore. Like buying an HMG for an extra 10 points plus a 1.5 SWC over a model that has a Thunderbolt with +1 burst for 10 fewer points and no SWC cost, I would rather purchase the cheaper model that has one fewer burst, right? I don't understand
Yeah, like the TR bots.
how that calculation makes sense. Yeah, TR bots are 5 points or 6 points less, right?
Yeah.
And you just get one less burst, and otherwise it's the same. It's a throwaway model anyways, so why would I not want to pay less points for my throwaway model? It just, I don't know. I think things like that
Really nice.
are bigger. And then the prevalence of disco balls and smoke still being just as prevalent as it was before means that people are going to be getting into CC a lot more often, I think. So I don't know. I've always liked CC, so maybe it's because I tend to gravitate towards those models that I've noticed that they're better. But, the event that I just won, I had a majority of my models were good in CC, and I think the majority of my conflicts were CC conflicts.
Okay.
So I think that being able to get into CC and being effective in CC is going to be more important moving forward as far as the meta goes, but I'm not really sure if that's just my playstyle.
I could see it being the case. Partially, I was talking to a local about this just on game night the other night, that I feel like CC has generally improved and is just, overall more powerful. And I think that part of that is because JSA is a full-fledged faction, and it's to kind of give them a big leg up and make it, it's easier to get in CC. CC tends to, hit harder or at least more reliably. And yeah.
And it's more fun.
Yeah. It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
CC is fun, man. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my hands down favorite model in the the new stuff for the edition has been the Hatamoto and Shindenbutai. It's just
that thing
amazing.
That thing is nuts.
And I just can I get it into CC and just wreck everything? Even one of the best ones, I was playing against Azoka, and he had to do a coordinated order with Shinobu and a regular ninja to get enough dice to take down the Hatamoto.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah, those guys are pretty badass.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think that, CC has historically been semi-tricky and kind of, usually not the recommended course of action when trying to engage in Infinity. Why are you bringing knives to a gunfight? Sort of
high risk, high reward.
Right, exactly. And now I think that the risk has gone down a little bit and the reward is largely the same or maybe even slightly larger. So I think more people will try to get in CC because there's more explosive results you can get, and it's just, you don't have to necessarily dump your whole order pool to make it happen either.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the rise of incidental CC, just random models that have 18s and 19s on their profile is going to change that, because I think that the CC change makes those 18s and 19 CC values more valuable than they used to be, even without any martial arts or any skills, right? So I think that might be a way that the game is sort of leveling out the higher prevalence of CC, because you're more likely to be a coin flip than you were previously. Because if you attack a guy who's got no CC skills, but he just happens to have an 18, right? Well, that means that he could roll, a 15 and beat your 6 or your 8.
Right.
If you're rolled just too high to crit, then
it's true. Yeah, I think that there can definitely be some of that. I think overall I like the change as far as values over 20. I think that it's a lot more intuitive for players.
I think it's definitely simpler, so it's better for new players.
Yeah.
I just have to wrap my head around it.
Right.
I still have trouble wrapping my head around how adding armor to my PS value works. Like I still have to stop and think about it for a minute. So I don't know. I'm getting used to it, but
fair.
That's just because I'm an old fart.
It did take a minute. That's probably the biggest thing I've noticed in terms of I'm still doing the math wrong in terms of that is an HMG, so it's damage 15, which means it's a PS5, so I need to roll an 8 plus my armor or less. Like, okay, so I have this
Right,
extra
yeah.
step still that I'm doing because I know the damage values of all these weapons still as what they were.
Yeah, same.
And I'm like,
Same. Plus, the fact that you meet it rather than beating it is
yeah,
different, right? So,
Yeah.
like, I need a 15. Oh, no, I need a 5. Oh, I rolled a 5. Oh, dang it. No, wait, that means it passes.
yep,
Right.
yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah, that's definitely a mental
yeah,
adjustment.
and the instinctual disappointment when you roll a 2, you're like, oh, man, I rolled a 2. And like, wait, that's good.
I'm
Right?
alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, also, something that's it's PS like 3, and it's like that sounds really lame, and then you realize no, that's
Yeah,
terrifying.
PS3 is terrifying. McMurrow's punch is terrifying. The
Exactly.
Agamemnon's PS4 flaming HMG of a penis is terrifying.
Bleh.
The Diablos are effectively a PS2.
Yeah, that's
Oh
not
my
right.
It is
I
so dumb.
I can't imagine that's not a mistake. That's just there's nothing else in the game that hits
God, I
that
hope that
hard.
gets corrected. No.
And as cool as those models are.
Now I gotta go look at those.
So I think with that, we're just about ready to transition to our final thoughts. But I want to say thanks to our patrons who support the show. And if you are interested and able to financially support the show, we'd love to have you at patreon.com/metachemistry. And from there, you can kind of take a look at some of the things that we offer as a show of thanks for you doing so, like early access to episodes, final voting on polls that we have periodically, exclusive sections on our Discord, and things like that. So if that sounds interesting to you, we'd love to have you because it helps keep everything running. None of this goes into our pockets. We don't have to pay ourselves or anything like that. Everything that comes in goes back to the show or like special projects related. So yeah, thank you very much to those of you who do and have continued to support us. And even if that's not your cup of tea, you can join us on our Discord, which is free and open, other than a couple of those specific channels. And that's a great place to talk Infinity, where you can find sweet paint jobs or people working on cool tables, or got a lot of talented folks that stop by there. So it's always a treat to see those. And if you want to bounce off lists or any other Infinity talk and some things beyond that, then you can find us in the show notes there as well. With that said, Rob, final thoughts on the Sin City Smackdown. Any parting words of wisdom or other little nuggets that you have related to that event, or maybe just the changeover and addition as a whole?
Well, it was a great event. I'd really like to thank George and Reese for running it. It was fantastic. I thought that all of the list restrictions were fun and interesting, and it really reinforces the maxim that it's not your list, it's you, right? And Infinity, which is a big part of our game.
Absolutely.
I had a lot of fun, and if you could make your way out to Las Vegas next year for the Sin City Smackdown,
Yeah.
which I keep calling LVO for the entire year.
Sure.
But it's not LVO. It's not LVO. It's just the same weekend as LVO now. But you should definitely try and do it because they're great hosts. They're very welcoming, and I highly recommend the event. Other than that, I really want to thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to expound and talk about my favorite game. Thanks for doing this, and thank you for continuing to provide excellent content for the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And, I look forward to you winning more events, and we'll have you back.
I'll do my best. I'll see what I can do.
Awesome. Well, on behalf of Metachemistry, this has been Devin.
Ian.
And Rob, and that's the meta.